What's up, this is Robert, and the reason I'm doing this video is because I had an insight this week about a few movies. Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and the movie Seven. And the insight that I had was that I started to see a similarity between the traits that they portray in the characters. And no, this is not a 1-to-1 ratio, Seven Dwarves and Seven Sins. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but there is some overlap. So let's go over that, and then I want to draw some conclusions and see how this could empower us. So the list of the Seven Dwarves is right here. We have Doc, happy, grumpy, sleepy, sneezy, dopey, and bashful. All right. Then we have the seven deadly sins, as seen in the movie Seven with Brad Pitt. Those are envy, gluttony, greed, lust, sloth, wrath, and pride. And in the last column, we have a few characters from the movie Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Now let's point out the similarities. Okay, Doc, if you watch, there's a YouTube video of Walt Disney introducing the dwarves, like Walt Disney himself. And so he's explaining the personalities of each of them. Doc, he says, is a little bit pompous and sort of full of himself, and so that kind of ties into pride. Then you've got Grumpy, which is going to relate to wrath or anger. You have Sleepy, which is going to relate to sloth, or in Willy Wonka, there's that kid Mike TV who carries like the little pistol, and he watches Western movies and stuff, but he just watches way too much TV, so that he would be kind of representative of sloth. And you have Sneezy. I don't think there's really any connections to Sneezy. Then you have Dopey. Not sure if there's anything there either. Then you come to Bashful, and Walt Disney describes Bashful as having, secretly desiring Snow White. Okay, so because of that, I put him in the same category as lust, and I tied in lust to Violet, which is the girl in Willy Wonka that becomes a blueberry. Now, why did I put her as lust? Well, because if you remember, the reason she becomes a blueberry is that she eats that gum that comes out of the machine. It's supposed to be a full meal, full like 3-course meal or 5-course meal in one piece of gum. And she has this addiction to gum, which you could see as some sort of oral fixation, if you want to look deeply into it. In any case, she can't really resist her impulse to grab the gum and chew it, so there you go, lust. Then we have greed. It's the deadly sin of greed, which is demonstrated very well by the character Veruca, who is the spoiled girl that keeps wanting the golden egg, and the golden goose that lays the golden egg, keeps begging her dad to buy one for her, all that. Then you have gluttony, which is demonstrated by Augustus, I think his name is Augustus Gloop or something, the guy, the German kid in Willy Wonka that just eats a lot. And in fact, gluttony is what brings about his disappearance from the factory, because he falls into the chocolate river after he starts like drinking it up by the handful. And then we have envy, which I'm not sure if there's any connection to the other movies with that one, but there we go. So now that we've established that there are some connections between the movies, now we have to figure out, what does this say about human nature? And it's going to get kind of like deeply layered here, because if you think about it, you have a bunch of human beings who created these movies, right? So human beings created these characters. And these movies express something about the human experience. So we have human beings trying to express something about the human experience through these depictions that take the form of these fictional human beings. So you see how it's very layered. Okay. Now, what we want to ask is, what does this say about human nature, and how can we use that to move forward or to understand ourselves better? And the big insight here is that over the last year I've started to think about my mind not as a collection of drives so much as a collection of people, so to speak. I think of the mind as a collection of these different, I guess you could say, voices or characters, right? So then in your mind you've got these various, almost like a cast, right? Almost like a cast of a play or a show or a movie. And you've got these different characters, so at some points of the day you might feel like tired, lazy, and then it's almost like that character is taking center stage at that moment. So that would be the character of, sloth or sleepiness or whatever. And other times there's the character of pride taking place, sloth, right? Well, I already covered it. Greed, gluttony. Okay, so if we look at the mind as a collection of these characters, then we got to ask, what would cause those characters to come to the stage? When we're angry, what adds to the anger? What sort of reaction from an audience or from an environment would cause a character to come on stage and to be encouraged and promoted, and so then they start taking over, and then they start running the whole show. Now, when that happens, all the other characters drift into the background. And that's when I'm reminded of quotes like the famous one from Tony Robbins that goes, where attention goes, energy flows. Right? Because if you put some attention, basically if you have a microphone and you're going to go up to one of these characters in your mind and hand the microphone or hold the microphone in front of that character and let them speak, they're going to go. They'll start doing their thing. They have their own agenda. Like, yeah, blah, blah, blah. And then they start monopolizing the mind. Okay? Now, let's go another layer deep and reflect on the fact that here we are, human beings, we have a mind, and right now we're using our mind to kind of understand the mind. So we're using our mind to understand our own mind, to understand itself, if that's even possible. And one part of the way that we understand the world is by understanding it socially. And that's because we evolved as social creatures. Okay, so something that we really understand universally across all human beings are these very basic, like, emotional things, like, oh, I'm feeling like tired or lazy, or I'm very angry at another person, or so-and-so is being prideful or too proud, and they're being pompous, and that's not right. Like, that's a social violation. Like, these concepts, which are played out in, for instance, like daytime television or soap operas or even like talk shows, right? So-and-so's being too greedy. These movements of, what about the 99%? We're the 99%. The 1%, they're so greedy, they're hanging on to most of the wealth, all that, right? So all these human beings, we understand these things. Why? Because these were crucial elements of our human evolution as we evolved in groups. These were conflicts that arose as we had to cooperate in groups. Now, if you think about it, you can totally see that. Envy, right? Looking at another person and wanting what they have. Wrath, being angry at another person. Sloth, not carrying your weight in the group. Pride, pride, thinking you're better than the other people in the group. Now this is how the human being is. We have to realize that what we're looking at as a person today in 2018 is a modern day fossil, or it's a clue to the millions of years that we spent evolving as social creatures. This is the whole field of evolutionary psychology. But why do we have these movies like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? I mean, look at the whole point at the end of it, which was you have this old man in charge of a whole chocolate factory, and he's looking for a young person he can pass the factory on to. And so he gives out these golden tickets, right? 5 or whatever, how many there were. These individuals come into the factory for a tour, and one, by process of elimination, he looks to see which ones don't deserve it, based on their behavior. One is too greedy, one is too impulsive, one is too lazy, right? And so each one, right? What happens to, we already said Violet, she eats the gum, or chews the gum, blows up into a blueberry. Veruca is throwing a tantrum because she wants that golden goose, so then she steps onto the egg scale, and then she falls into like the incinerator or something. Augustus is drinking up the chocolate river, he falls into the river, right? So what's the moral that it's trying to portray? It's trying to portray that we need to get a handle on these things, right? So how would we do that? Okay. Let me pause this because I'm gonna state another important point in a second. All right, final point. Now, these layered thoughts are just keep streaming in to me right now, so I'm going to keep going with them. Some psychologists, philosophers, whatever, will point out, scientists, will point out that if you look at the history of like human evolution, like we started with reptile brain, then we developed, these like emotions, mammalian brain, and then finally, most recently in history, we've developed this outer cerebral cortex that allows for very complex thought, very abstract, doing mathematics, planning ahead, all of that. And it took millions of years for that to happen. They point out that throughout a lifetime, when you're born, right, a newborn baby is going to have the rudimentary human faculties, it's going to be all about the reptile brain, like the feeding, I'm hungry, I'm sleepy, I'm uncomfortable, right? Then, as the newborn baby grows up into a toddler, then there's these emotions of, now I'm angry, I'm going to throw a tantrum, or I'm jealous, or this or that, right? And then they grow up and they're able to start thinking ahead, like, wait, a year from now, where do I want to be in life? And start to do all of this, right? Forethought, prefrontal cortex things. That a fully grown adult, they say that the brain doesn't finish growing completely until age 25. So throughout an individual human lifespan, the brain is still developing. And maybe the stages of development kind of mirror the stages of human evolutionary history. I don't know exactly how similar they are, but it's a concept. So, that being said, okay, the story of the human mind is a story of an organism that evolved and had to fulfill these selfish needs, but then had to learn to cooperate in groups, right? Because throughout much of the history, we were evolving in groups. So that's when all these problems had to be solved, because if you started going around like taking, right? Greed, gluttony, whatever, that caused a problem for the group. There was a video that came up on my Facebook feed. It's like one of those viral videos, and it was of The Rock, you know, Dwayne Johnson, the Rock. And he apparently gave a brand new truck to, as a gift to his stunt double. And then the stunt double was like he was crying, and he was so like moved by it. And this video was on one of those, you know, happy news sort of feeds or whatever. And so you have to ask, okay, why is that? Why does that cause feel-good emotions, and why does that go viral? Well, it's a very pro-social thing to do. So if you look at these deadly sins, right? The Rock is very wealthy, very well off, which sets the stage for greed. And that's counteracted by, if he's going to give away this free truck, right? It suddenly makes his wealth a little more acceptable to the rest of us, because now we think, oh, whoa, he might give something to us too. And I mean, this comes up in all movies. Like, think about Ebenezer Scrooge, right? That's basically a movie about this guy that's like so greedy about, he doesn't even give his assistant the day off for Christmas or something, right? And then he's visited by these ghosts, and then he wakes up Christmas morning, and all of a sudden he wants to like give, right? And so is that an evolution? Is that a personality evolution on his part? Right? I mean, imagine if these characters in Willy Wonka, you know, like Augustus, who was drinking from the chocolate river. Imagine if he had a bucket and he started like scooping out the chocolate river, but not for himself. It was because he saw some starving kids like outside of the factory, and he wanted to give them some of this chocolate, and he's like scooping it up, right? And it's like, it would not make sense in the movie if he like perished. Like, that would be a bad thing if he like drowned in the river. It's like, man, he was like he's trying to like feed those starving kids outside of the the homeless kids outside of the factory, right? So it's very important, like, that human action takes place in a context, right? And so I've explained there's a lot of ideas I've touched on today. A lot of them have to do with human condition, why we have the emotions that we do, how they came about throughout evolutionary history. Right? So now what we need to do, like the vision that I have for the future, is for this planet to be full of human beings who are aware of these things and understand like what the human being is. Like, it's important to understand like what is a human being? Like, why do we have these problems, these social problems of inequality and whatnot? And why is inequality a problem to us? What does it mean to be pro-social? I think a big part of it is intention. And I don't know why I wrote on the top of my notes here when I was writing down all these things, you know, early one morning, and there's just flooding, the thoughts were flooding in. I wrote down, what is goodness? So what is goodness? And what is good intention? I feel like good intention it's almost unbeatable in the sense of Like, nobody would object to, like, good intention. Like, if you really, really want good things to happen to other people and you behave in that way, which is very pro-social. Like, I don't see how anybody could oppose that. The only exception would be like if somebody's trying to take advantage of you and you're just like, oh yeah, sure, I'll help you, this or that, right? Then it looks like you're being taken advantage of. But if we think about this, could good intention be a more like a higher like stage of evolution? Like, think about like what animals in the animal kingdom, like, over across the whole planet, like all the species, right? Which animals are capable of like positive intention towards others, like really like trying to help? Could an alligator, would an alligator like see that another alligator is struggling and then just try to like use its tail to like brush away like a rock that's like in the path of another alligator that can't go over the rock or something? You can see this more in the primates because they're more closely related to us genetically, right? Study Francis de Waal and you'll see examples of chimpanzees helping each other. Even like gorillas see another gorilla fall into the river or the moat at the zoo, the other gorillas start like howling, trying to get somebody's attention, try to reach down, pick up the other gorilla and like bring them out. Like, but humans are at the pinnacle of that, right? The way that we're able to help each other in a pro-social way. So anyways, if we're going to see, the human experience is a social experience. So if we're going to ask about ourselves and our own motivation, okay, how are we going to motivate ourselves? It's going to be through. That's why it's so powerful when we imagine that we're being watched. And right here, this is the psychology of religion. Like, to me, now I don't practice any form of theism right now or higher being, but I understand why it works. Why people say, what would Jesus do? Or God is watching. Or even, shoot, it's December right now. Santa Claus is keeping a list of who's naughty and who's nice. Why does that work? Question, it's secondary to ask, is this correct or not? Another, maybe a more important question is to ask, why does this work? Does it work, and then why does it work? It's motivating because it is aligned with the truth that the human mind is a social mind. That we're aware of other minds, right? What are other people going to think? We see somebody reaching for something, we think, oh, they're trying to reach for that thing. We see somebody sad, we think, or somebody angry, we think, did we do something to like make them upset? Like, we understand that there's something going on in that other person's mind, and we want to figure that out. So whole human experience. Now I'm starting to think about life differently in terms of, I made another video called Levels of Energy, or it was a book review of levels of energy. And I had this whole scale on the board, basically categorizing like these human emotional states from like low vibrational energy to high. Now if you look at these are all low vibrational energies, right? Greed, lust, sloth, wrath. They would be like in the zeros to like 200. And then to get higher, then you have to ask what's the opposite. So if you have, what's the opposite of pride? Humility. Opposite of wrath, right? So not bragging about yourself. Opposite of wrath would be being calm with people, understanding, not getting angry. So humble. So imagine a person who's humble, calm, not lazy. So they're hardworking. They're not too impulsive. They don't jump the gun. They're not greedy, so they share. They don't take more than they should. They can practice moderation. And they're happy with what they have. They don't covet what other people have. Think about that. What if you were humble, very calm with other people, hardworking, you shared, you're self-disciplined. Like already I'm feeling good just like thinking about that. So the question of, existence first, okay? It's about, this is an existentialist philosophy. So creating ourselves. Who do we want to be? What character do we want to be? What part do we want to play in the community? What do we want to do for other people? It's really a different perspective to ask them. What can I do for other people? And any time that I can get myself into that mode of like genuinely wanting to help and acting out of that desire, always feels better, you know. There's this video of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know if it was an interview or what, but he was talking about how he agreed to help out at the Special Olympics one time. And so he's got all these people, all these kids with special needs lined up to do a bench press, and he's spotting them. So you get this one kid comes up, lies down, does some lightweight bench presses, feels great. Next kid comes, does the same thing, feels great. Finally, there's this kid that comes, and he's like trembling, and he's too scared. And then Arnold was like, lie down, just push it. And the kid, like, even the empty bar, like the kid was too scared to do it. And Arnold was like, just go to the end of the line and come back. And so the kid, like, he watched everybody else do it, and then finally the kid had enough courage to lie down and do the bench press. And so he did the bench press, and he's like, empty bar, right? And he's like, more, and then, so Arnold put like a 10-pound plate on each side. And the kid did it again, a set of reps. And then he's like, more, and then so Arnold put like 20 reps, or 20 pounds on it. The kid bust out another set of reps. And by the end, this kid was like jumping up and down and so excited. And Arnold said, why did I feel so good? I didn't make millions of dollars by filming a movie like Terminator. He's like, I made zero money that day. Why did I feel so good about helping this kid with special needs? And I think it's about being like pro-social. Now, of course, is there such a thing as being too pro-social? Maybe. It's like, what if you like say, I'm going to quit my job and just go walk the streets and try to help people? And, I mean, pretty soon you're going to have like, you won't have a place to live or food, or I don't know. It's an experiment. Maybe it would work out. But what I'm looking at right now is I'm looking outside, like there's a window right here. I could look outside at our society and I could think. So the way things are set up right now, people get in this vehicle, they drive their vehicle to a day job, they sit at some desk, and they like follow some orders, do this stuff. They receive a direct deposited paycheck every 2 weeks, drive back home in their car, lie down, go to sleep or whatever, do the same thing again the next day. So I don't know, it's like, that stuff never has jazzed me, and it's like, how can you truly feel alive? Like, is there a way to get back in touch with these like very, like basic, like human interactions? It's funny how when I think back to like kindergarten, how natural it was to like play, and just like, I remember in kindergarten we would like play house, right? So we had these little setups of like this little fake house or whatever, a fake kitchen, and we assigned roles, and we're like, you're gonna do this, you're gonna do right? I'm gonna be the household, whatever, keep the household. You're gonna go like, you're gonna watch the kids, or whatever. Like, we just assign these roles to each other so naturally. Which again points out to the human mind is a social mind. So it kind of concerns me anytime that we are asked to use our mind to do things that are not social, right? Like to program computers. And I'm speaking from experience because I used to program. I did that for like a year in college, right? I was studying computer programming. And for me, it missed like a human element, you know? Like, is there such a thing as fully experiencing your humanness, or experiencing your full humanness? Is there such a thing? Like, are there people that you haven't reached out to in a while that you need to reach out to and just spread good energy to? Are there, and that reminds me of, like, I have other videos on top 5 regrets of the dying, and one of them is about staying in touch with friends. I wish I had stayed in touch with friends. So this is the whole psychology, right? This is my understanding of psychology. And this is what my professors never explained to me. Psychology professors, they never explained this to me. The closest was like the evolutionary psychology class. But this is why I have these videos. I have a product called like The Roles We Play. It was a lecture basically showing how our behavior is a result of the role that we think we're playing, which, that falls under this principle that the human mind is a social mind. And if you wanted to watch it, just go to the website. It's under products and services. But what's the takeaway here? I know I keep saying that. I keep saying that over and over, right? But the takeaway, the ideas are just flowing right now. And the takeaway is that if the human mind is a social mind, then the human life is a social life. That's the key. Human life is a social life. I think I'll leave it at that, because that's something that I'd like to ruminate on. Okay? So if you enjoyed this video, share it with people who would also enjoy it. And make sure you subscribe, because there will be more to come for sure.